Good afternoon, this is Chandra Easton here, esoteric astrologer, speaking to you about the esoteric nature of the sign of Aries. You'll find me at livinginlightstarastrologyhealing.com, and this talk is part of the series of talks on the esoteric nature of the zodiac, and I'm starting here with the sign of Aries. This is the first sign of the zodiac, and the sun moves through Aries around about the 21st of March through till the 20th of April. 21st of March is the equinox, that's either the autumnal or the spring equinox, depending upon which hemisphere that you're in, but it's esoterically the beginning of the year. Here in the southern hemisphere, it's approaching Easter. Being the first sign of the zodiac, Aries is a bit self-absorbed. It governs the head, and I suppose you could say Aries are fairly colourful individuals. They sometimes wear hats. They're often very, very headstrong. Sometimes they're deep thinkers. Other times they have great capacity to inspire leadership and hope. Really, it depends upon how evolved they are. If they're at the beginning of their evolution, then they have courage and they want to commence and begin things. If they're further along with their soul development, they may emerge as highly creative or strong leadership, and further along the path again, their inspiration is to resurrect and to foster hope. It's the little personality who rules through Mars. The soul's ruler is Mercury, and the immortal self, the I am spirit's connected to the planet Uranus, depending upon where we are on the turn of the spiral. Yes, so let's talk about the beginning of the sign of the zodiac, the beginning when we are in the ordinary realm, the exoteric or the worldly aspect of Aries. And if we're in this exoteric or worldly aspect, then we're very focused upon ourselves. It's me and my, and we are the centre of our own universe, and we think that we are the centre of everything else. So great selfishness can be the problem. And this is because the personality is in the process of developing and the soul hasn't yet had a look in. Yes, and so for that reason, there can be difficulties with insight into motivations for the self, and that the focus can really be worldly things. What's good for me, my money, my sex, my goals, my. Aries is in a pair or a polarity with the sign of Libra, and you could say that somewhere between the sign of Aries and the sign of Libra, we're working to try and develop that awareness of what's mine is yours and yours is mine. The exoteric or the traditional ruler is Mars. The circle, which always represents the soul, is subservient here. It's underneath the upward pointing arrow. Now, in some of the old style glyphs, you'd see the sort of cross up above it, but most people would know the glyph of Mars, and it's often associated with masculinity. But of course, it's the masculine within everyone, within the feminine and within men, and it is the baser nature of the personality that comes to the foreground when the individual doesn't have soul connection and soul awareness, and then the Mars dominates, and we can have a very, very powerful sex drive, or we can have strong selfishness. We can have this motivation to pursue what it is that I want at all costs. There's a strong link between the sign of Aries, which used to be called the sign of the ram, and the Greek mythology of Jason and the search for the golden fleece. And I don't know this particular myth, but I guess what I'd say about it is that it's connected to way back in our prehistory. And the golden fleece, I would assume, represents something associated with the grace of the heart. Now, the exoteric, that's the worldly keynote. As long as we're on that turn of the spiral where we're building the ego, then we have to seek form, seek physical incarnation again and again and again. And that's because the personality believes that it is defined by the world, defined by things that it creates. People who have Aries strong are often highly adventurous. You find a tremendous amount of sportsmen. You know, they see a mountain, they want to climb it. They see a goal, they have to pursue it. It takes a lot of many incarnations for us to learn that to ask ourselves, is the goal worth pursuing? Is that a mountain I really want to climb? Just achieving and driving forward and succeeding and winning for the sake of the ego ultimately leads us back around this turn of the spiral where form has to be sought again and again and again. Medically, it has a great deal to do with the brain and the headstrong nature, and as I said, it does take a while before the Aries individual begins to make contact with the soul and begins to sort of think clearly. Yeah. And up until that point, it's the baser fire, you know, the fire of the material world, the fire of the sexual world, the fire of achievement, the fire of satiating the form life. And of course, on a worldly level, it's got a great connection to volcanoes, to fires, to bushfires. This great haste. This is the cardinal fire, so it's the fire energy that erupts quickly. Now, esoterically, this is from the soul. The theme is I come forth, and from the plane of mind, I rule. And so, of course, here we're moving from the rational mind upwards through the spiral of evolutions until we get to the point of the higher mind or the intuitive mind, and we begin to tune into the still quiet voice within. Esoterically, this is connected to the fourth ray of harmony through conflict, and there are challenges associated with conflict resolution. This could be the conflict between my ego and my soul, or it could be that once the soul's working well, and here you can see the circle of spirit in the glyph of Mercury has risen above the cross of matter. It still has the arc of inspiration above it. So people who are in contact with this soul, they often work as go-betweens, public relations. They're mediators because they've learnt something about mediation between their personal self and their higher self. One of the best ways to connect with the light of the soul is through meditation and higher study, and this opens the door to the higher mind. And once we open the door to the higher mind, then the light of the higher self begins to stream in and illuminate and activate different parts of our consciousness, just different parts of our awareness, different parts of our brain. And we begin to operate from a frequency that is closer to the soul. And this can come through with inspired writings or inspired thought or inspired dreams or inspired ability to inspire a crowd. You know, you can be an orator. And so this powerful energy of the soul, when it's coming in via the planet Mercury, it works to synthesize and harmonize, and that is the fourth ray in action, the personality and the soul. You can see this diagram here where we have the personality pointing to the earth and the immortal self pointing to the heavens, and the six-pointed star, the integration of the personality and the soul in the middle of the seven rays. So this is a very important goal, and we may have to move around the sign of Aries and around the zodiac many times, because Aries, for most individuals, either indicates that we're completely asleep and unaware of the soul, or indicates that we are making sporadic attempts to be spiritual aspirant. We're in the very early stages of spiritual aspirancy. And spiritual aspirancy can take, well, who knows how many lifetimes, you know, is it 10, 20, who knows? I've included President Lincoln here in this wonderful phrase, the probability that we may fail in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause that we believe to be just. I think it's a wonderful phrase, a wonderful sentence that epitomises an Aries, and indeed he was a sun in Aries, who's got that connection to the thinker, has that connection to the soul, and wants to work for a cause. Yes, and so for yourself, tune in and ask, well, what is the cause where I feel passionate about, that I want to serve and I want to initiate action in? And the cause may be to integrate the disparate parts of yourself so that you can bring into harmony your personal self and your soul. Because that surely has to be our first point of call, is to get a degree of synthesis and harmony within ourselves. And eventually we will be able to move to the cardinal cross, where the initiates operate with the urge to liberate, the urge to resurrect, and to share hope. And you can see here with the cardinal crosses, Aries and Libra, Cancer and Capricorn, and there are very, very few people on earth who are utilising these 4 signs of the zodiac from the higher initiate perspective, because these are the leaders, or these are the outposts of holiness who are working to try and help humanity to move forward. Now, those who are operating from that higher frequency, they are responding to the group ruler of Aries, which is Uranus. So we have this sort of cosmic consciousness and this electrical high frequency energy where we've moved beyond the rational brain, the higher mind, to the cosmic mind, and we have that ability to bring hope and to liberate and to resurrect. And you can have someone with strong Aries who can resurrect a civilization, or they may work as a healer to assist you in your vibration, your healing or resurrection, or they may be bringing hope. And certainly here we are in the second decade of the 21st century, where there's a great amount of new initiative coming, and what we need more than anything else is hope, in that our society can move through this great process known as the Great Change. Let's talk about the constellations connected to Aries. Cassiopeia, the enthroned queen, Perseus, who's the hero, and Cetus, sometimes called the sea monster or the whale. I've done a little bit of reading about this, and Cassiopeia is known as the enthroned queen, and she's there she is sitting there upon her throne, and this constellation circles around the Arctic, but she hangs upside down in a chair. And the mythology tells us that she was very vain. She was the mother of Andromeda, very, very vain, and she thought herself and her daughter extremely beautiful, and this caused great trouble and great problems. And there was an attack made by the sea monster on her daughter Andromeda, and Perseus, who's the other constellation here in the sign of Aries, is the hero who comes in to rescue the maiden. So we have the theme of hubris, or too much focus upon the self, thinking oneself is beautiful, both women, Cassiopeia the queen and the daughter, and we have the hero Perseus coming in to try and rescue Andromeda. Andromeda had been attacked and violated by the whale known as Cetus, sometimes called the sea monster. And Cetus sits around the equator. And so these 3 constellations are part of the mythology associated with Aries. And so this sort of violation of the feminine and the masculine hero coming in to rescue the feminine is very important. Yeah, now let's talk about the Hercules labour. The Hercules labour is the capture of the man-eating mares, and I thought I'd read it to you. And Hercules is the Greek hero, and he's a son of man who becomes a son of God. And there's something about the teaching of Hercules that we can all learn a great deal about. So I'll read the myth to you. The first great gate stood open wide, and a voice, that is King Euthius, came through that portal. Hercules, my son, go forth through the gate and enter on the way. This is the spiritual path, the way. Perform thy labour and return to me, reporting on the deed. So Hercules goes forth with great confidence and surety of power. He is the son of Mars, Diomedes of fiery fame. The son of Mars, Diomedes of fiery fame, ruled in the land beyond the gate, and there he raised the horses and the mares of war upon the marshes of his land. And so there's the theme of war that is very, very strong with the sign of Aries. Wild were these horses and fierce the mares, there's the feminine again, and all men trembled at their sound, for they ravaged up and down the land, wreaking great damage, killing all the sons of men who crossed their path, and breeding steadily most wild and evil horses. So let's just discuss this for a minute. Let's pull it apart. There we have the hero Hercules, who's untried and untested, entering into his first task. He's been sent out by his teacher into the realms of Mars, and there are wild horses there and they're breeding. Yeah? So of course, as we are sent out to do battle with the ego, and we are in the physical realms, there's war everywhere, there's ego everywhere, there's wild horses, and there's havoc. And the task Hercules is given is to capture these mares and stop these evil deeds. That is the command that fell upon Hercules' ears. Go rescue this fair land and those who live upon it. Okay, so he has to rescue the land, he has to capture the wild and the evil horses that are breeding. Okay, so he has a friend, and the friend's name is Abderus, who's a great friend, and he asks if he will aid him. And so they make a careful plan, and they follow the horses. And they eventually corner the wild mares in a field, and there's nowhere else to move. So they've got them cornered. And they caught and tethered them. Well, Hercules was absolutely elated at this, because as far as he was concerned, he had success. He'd captured the mares, he'd cornered them, he'd tethered them, but he thought it was beneath his dignity to hold the mares. And so he called his friend Abderus, and he delegated the task that he had been given to drive the horses back through the gate. And he turned his back, and with great pride he marched forward. So here's the pride and the hubris of the sign of Aries. He's rushed headlong into the task, he's half done it, he's passed it over to somebody else who sees it as beneath him. But what happens? Well, Abderus, this is his greatest friend, was weak and afraid of the task, and he couldn't hold the mares. Now, the mares represent the various facets of the ego or the personality, and he was unable to harness them and drive them back through the gates. Excuse me. And so they turned on him, and they rent and they trod him underfoot, because the great many of them, remember, there's a whole vast field full, an array of these mares. It's not just one or two. And they killed him and escaped into the wilder lands of Diomedes. Okay, so Hercules was wiser and grief-struck and humbled and discouraged. So there's his best friend has been murdered, has been killed by the mares, and so he realises that he hasn't done the task, and he has to attend to it again. He has to return to his task. So again he seeks the mares from place to place. They've left his friend dying upon the ground. It doesn't seem like he makes any attempt to rescue his friend. Again he caught the horses and drove them through the gate himself, but Abderus lay dead. So eventually he does manage to catch the horses, and he does bring them back to the teacher, but at what cost? The cost is very great. And the teacher looked him over with care and sent the horses to the place of peace, there to be tamed and broken to their tasks. So the horses represent all the various foibles of the ego. He's got impatience, he has hubris, he has selfishness, arrogance, pride. The people of the land were released from fear, and they welcomed Hercules as their deliverer and saviour. But his friend Abderus lay dead. And this is often, unfortunately, what happens when Aries energy is involved, is we put our own needs ahead of the needs of our others, often our best friends, our marriage partners, our lovers, our children, and death results. Yeah? The task was to bring the horses in so that the people could be free, but it took quite a while to do that. Well, the teacher turned to Hercules and said, "Labour, the first is ended. The task is done, but very badly done. learn the true lesson of this task, and then pass on to further service to your fellow men. So this is the first hint we have, that there are other tests and other trials. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so we know that there will be 11 more tests and trials. And one would assume that each test and trial will build upon the preceding one, and one would assume that each test and trial will gain in strength and difficulty as we go further and further along. Well, this one seemed hard enough, and it had such dreadful outcomes. Could you claim it to be a success when it was only half done? And what's happened is that the best friend is dead. Learn the true lessons and pass on. Go forth into the country. And here he begins to talk to him about the second test. Guarded by the second gate, and find and take the sacred bull into the holy place. Yes, so these tests are the tests for all those who would aspire to progress along the spiritual path, to become a spiritual disciple. So we start out as a spiritual aspirant, with full of hubris, full of arrogance, full of pride, full of conviction that we can do things, that we need to lead, that people need to follow us. Yes. And as we move slowly from Aries through the sign of Pisces, we will learn to bring these wild horses under wraps. And so I just invite you here to think about the wild horses that you need to bring under control. And in order to understand that, think about your natal chart. Think about where your Mars is. Think about, the aspects to your Mars. Maybe you've got a square to Saturn. Maybe there is an issue of self-control. Maybe you've got a square to Uranus. Maybe you're very impulsive and reckless. Maybe your Mars is in Scorpio, and there are passions associated with sexuality that are the hubris. Maybe you have the moon in Aries, and some of the conflict is with your feminine self, or with the women in your life, or conflict that comes from your childhood, or with your mother. Maybe you have Aries rising, and your soul is urging you on to lift your vibration from the lower vibration of Mars up to the esoteric ruler of Mercury, so that you begin to think before you act. Maybe you have Aries on the midheaven, and maybe you're called to work in a courageous manner or an inspired manner in the world. Yeah, so those individuals, and you see, it's going to take us all our lifetimes of spiritual aspirancy, and all our lifetimes and that's on the mutable cross when we have the spiritual aspirancy, and all of our lifetimes on the fixed cross, until we can bring the Aries energy under control of the immortal self, the I am self. So we go from the personality in control, that's Mars, through the soul in control, when Mercury's dominating, to the immortal self in control when we have the planet Uranus. And Uranus is the highest vibration. Yes, so much to learn here about this movement from aspirancy. And of course, you look at this image here, and the horses can bite and the horses can kick, and they ran away and they're willful, and they're giving Hercules a great run for his money. And clearly he's created karma through this half-done task and through the hubris. And the karma has affected his relationships. It's affected his closest, most dearest friend. And we therefore know that whatever harm we have created to others through our selfishness or our hubris in our earlier incarnations, we will have to address that karma when we get further along the zodiac. Aries is one of the signs of aspirancy, spiritual aspirancy, as is Taurus, as is Gemini, as is Cancer, as is Sagittarius. We have several signs where it's almost like we have to learn that we have a personality, but we are not that personality. We have a body, but we are not that body. We have emotions, but we are not those emotions. We have thoughts, but we are not those thoughts. We are the soul. And these lifetimes of spiritual aspiration, we continue and continue and continue through them until we recognise I am the soul and I have a body, I have a mind, I have emotions, I have a personality, but that's not who I really am. Yeah? This is the test of spiritual aspirancy in order to shift from the mutable cross and remember, well, if you haven't listened to the other teachings, you may not know that it's going to take us until we get up to Leo before we can begin that tremendous process of birthing onto the fixed cross, the cross of spiritual discipleship, the cross where and when I say cross, what I mean by that is service, where we dedicate our efforts and our tasks and our energy for the betterment of the world, not for the betterment of the self. We have to learn to put the personal self, the ego, the hubris behind us and work for a greater good. And in this very first test that Hercules has, he really has no idea. It's absolutely no. He has courage. He's prepared to do it. Out he goes. He doesn't have any weapons with him. Yeah, I think probably he takes a rope or something like that. And of course, this is what happens when we first enter upon the spiritual path, is that we have a great sense of fantastic, let's get on with it. We have no idea how difficult this task will be. We have no idea that we're going to need tools of the higher mind. We have no idea that it's going to take many, many, many incarnations to rein in the ego so that our Mars is subservient to the higher mind through Mercury. And eventually, Mercury will become a vehicle for the light of Uranus. Yes, so I hope that you're able to think about this and apply it to your chart, wherever the Aries is in your chart, and look at your natal chart slightly differently. If you're an astrologer or a student astrologer, maybe you've always looked at your Aries and thought about Mars. Yeah? Or maybe you've looked at your Mars and thought that was the way forward. But if you start looking very closely at your chart, what's the relationship between Mars and Mercury in your chart? Mercury being supposing, for instance, you have Aries rising, because the rising sign of the zodiac is nothing more than a path of ascension, a path that your soul would like you to take in order to bring these wild mares, the wild horses, under control. Yes, and so recognising that the task was done and badly done, but